Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome again to Journalistic Writing. In this class, we'll talk about two different topics. First of all, report writing, and in the second part of this lecture, we'll focus on, two more styles of writing, descriptive and narrative. If you remember in our last class, we studied expository writing, and in the last part of, our lecture, I tried to explain you what reports are and, how they are written. And of course, we didn't go into details, actually. It was sort of a bird's-eye view, actually. So today I'll focus, on the details of, report, and then, of course, descriptive and narrative, writings, we'll go into. Now, the question is, what are reports? Well, reports are orderly and objective communication of factual information that, serve some specific purpose. Now, in this definition, I used some keywords which are quite meaningful, actually. Like the first one I said, the first pair of, words I used, orderly and objective. Now, these, keywords, of course, they are telltale, and they, can be considered as the characteristics, of report writing or good reports. Like good reports are always orderly and they're objective. Orderly means, they follow some specific organization. Their beginning and their ending, they are very much, I would say, standardized and fully organized, And the second thing, objective. Reports have got nothing to do with emotionalism, They are basically intellectual document, and they always engage their readers in intellectual debates. That's why we say they are orderly and objective details. No subjectivity. You, describe things the way things are. You narrate things the way things are. You do not try to, color the facts and figures, with any fiction. The third, characteristic from this definition of report writing, if I go back again, orderly and objective communication of factual information. Now, the word communication actually means the same thing. I mean, writers and readers, the relationship which brings these two bodies together, of course, that's the piece of information, which writer wants to convey, of course, to the reader. And it has to be not... information, has to be communicated, actually, not sent. Because we have, studied in our previous classes that a message sent is never a message received, Message has to be communicated. Whatever, information or ideas are in reader's mind, writer has to, try his level best, to convey the same images, the same piece of information, the same meanings and ideas, to his readers. And when, minds match, writer's mind and reader's mind, then, of course, we say this is what, communication has occurred and it happened. And, of course, when minds match, we say, communication is no doubt effective and, of course, meaningful. And factual information, as I said before, reports are factual details. They've got nothing to do with the fiction. And then other, characteristics, for example, orderly and objective communication of factual information that serves some specific purpose. Now, three keywords: serves. Report is basically sort of a service-oriented document. Reports are written to make, readers' job easy. Writers help their readers to, let's say, get their readers informed. They help their readers, read some conclusions. Writers, they suggest their readers, okay? Instead that, readers, they, plunge into the ocean of details. This job, writers do, and they, present information in such a, user-friendly manner that, readers, they find things, so easy to understand. And basing on those things, they can very much, decide things or, take advice from. So it's sort of like, service, which writers, offer their readers. And specific purpose, of course, reports, they are extremely focused. The strongest, I would say, point in report writing, which writers have to take care of is, every report should have, its focus. They should not be discussing, the dispersed, elements of a document. They should have one strong focus, and writer should try, to hold that focus throughout of his document, and should not, start anywhere in the point of writing report, beat about the bush, and they're try to confuse his readers. So all reports, they have strong focus. Unlike expository, unlike descriptive, unlike narrative. Of course, focus is important there also. But in reports, its importance get, I would say, multiplied. And then in the, towards the end part of the characteristic of report, purpose. Every report, has one purpose. Writers write it to inform, or to educate, or to entertain, or to persuade, for example. Whatever writers want to, they strictly, stick to it, and this is how, these documents, they serve their purposes. Now, let's talk about the classification of reports. Now, this document, can be classified into many different, ways. Let's say time can be a point of classification. Space can be, a point of classification. Its technicality can be, destination can be its point of classification. Formality can be, subject can be its classification. But we'll focus in this lecture or in this course only two, classifications of report. One from content point of view, and the second from the length point of view. Let's start from the length point of view. From the length, we can very simply say, well, reports are of two types: long reports and short reports. When I say long reports, it means manuscript reports, like your books, for example, magazines, for example. These are excellent examples of manuscripts. I mean, just take hold of your book and see, how it is organized. You have in your book some title pages, there are some content pages, some illustrations are there, then the body of the book is there. If you move towards the end part of your book, over there you find some, reference pages, there are some, what you call indexes are there, some, appendices are. So exactly the same way, when we say long reports, and I named it, manuscript report format, they exactly follow the same, organization, I would say. In manuscript reports or in long reports, of course, the same way you'll have some, title pages, some acknowledgement, abstract thing. Then the report proper, the body of the report, its introductory part, its findings, its debates and discussions, then moving towards the end part of the report where, you will be, of course, talking about some references which you, the books, the journals, the websites, you consulted exactly in the same order. Of course, you give the details, and then, of course, indexes and appendices, all bits and pieces, which we find in the books, exactly the same way you, follow for your long reports. Now, second thing I said, reports are short also. Short reports means, let's say, reports which are written exactly in the format of letters and memorandum, for example. Here, of course, we do not follow reports like the way we, we write, books or magazines. Here, short reports are sort of run-on, documents. Like one point you discuss, the moment you finish discussing the first point, right after that, you start discussing the second and the third and the fourth. So it's kind of a very continued, run-on, document till the last page, where you end. We'll discuss, of course, these, the length of reports in detail, and, of course, the format in view of the length. And the second division, as I said, is the content division or classification of report. When I say content, it means the report proper, actually. Now, look, I'm using some words, report proper, and its opposite word is report optional. Now, what's the difference in these two? Report proper means, the body of the report, where, you'll be discussing the actual crux of the matter. And report optional, for example, these are just protocols. For example, title page, let's say, or content page, acknowledgement, for example, let's say bibliography in the end, or appendices or indexes. All these are protocols of your report. Long report I'm talking about. And incidentals, between these two protocols, for example, title pages, acknowledgements, and the end part of it, reference pages and, some indexes, the insidals, the area, which you sandwich, between these two buns, that's actually we call it, body of your report. That is called report proper. Over there, of course, you talk about, the subject which you are, investigating, its different findings and, your conclusions, your recommendations, all these details, of course, you sum up in that part. Now, let's discuss, in detail the length and the content of, this part, so that, we could really understand what exactly we mean by long and short reports, and then what's the content division or classification of reports. Let's start from the long report. As I told you before, long reports are also called as manuscript, reports. There might be a question in your mind, how would we know that which one is a short and which one is a long? Probably I mentioned in the last class also, look, I have now divided my reports into two classes. One long and second is short. Now short, as I told you, short reports are written in letter and memo format, and the long report in manuscript. When I say letter report format, letter report is, let's say, 5-page long only. If your report goes on to 6th page, for example, then that's no more short report. You'll have to change your format and will switch over, of course, you to manuscript report format. Now, if it's memo, for example, memo means memorandum. Letter report, of course, goes externally and memo goes internally. Now, memo report can be written up to 10 pages. And if your report goes, let's say, onto the 11th or 12th page, again, you'll have to switch over to manuscript report format. So it means, from here we understand that manuscript report format is either from 6-page onwards or from 11-page onwards. I mean, if you are writing report within the organization, I mean, you're writing your report, let's say, to your colleagues. You're writing your reports, let's say, to your seniors, for example. You're writing it, to your boss, for example, for some decisions. Now, this is internal report, okay? So, internal reports are always written, if they are short, short means, 10-page, up to 10-page. They are written in memo report format. When they cross 10-page, they become 11 or 12-page, for example, then you choose manuscript, which is a long report. But if your reports are going out of your organization, let's say to some other, neighboring organization, then, of course, you cannot use this memo report format. You'll have to choose letter report format, because letters actually are, documents which you send from your organization to another organization. So, letter report form. Now, letter's length is maximum 5-page, not more than 5. Now, exactly the same way, if you cross 5-page, your document is of, let's say, 6 or 7, then again, you'll have to switch over to manuscript report format. So, this is how you can decide which one is short and which one is long report. Coming back to the parts of long report, of course, the same way I'll divide long reports parts into two, sections. One, I'll say optional components, and the second, I'll say proper components. In optional components, of course, there will be, first of all, flap, which we call title flap also. Number 2, title page. Number 3, abstract. Number 4, acknowledgement. Number 5, table of contents. Number 6, table of illustration. Now, these are 6 components which are, you can say, preliminary components, and these components come at the beginning of your report. From title flap to title, and then abstract, acknowledgement, and then comes table of content and table of illustration. These 6 components at the beginning of your manuscript report. The remaining parts of optional, components, which you, bring at the end of your report, they are, for example, appendices, and then bibliography, footnotes, and index. Now, these are at the end of the document. Now, inside these two, you have report proper, or you can say, the core or the compulsory components, of your report. What are they? Number 1, introduction. Number 2, findings. Number 3, conclusion. And number 4, recommendation. Now, these are your total 14 components of manuscript report format. Let's now discuss these, one by one, individually, what each component is and what you write, in that component. First of all, title flap. Title flap is the outermost page of your, report. On this title flap, you write only the title of your report, the topic, you can say, of your, report. If you are, investigating, for example, the media war, for example, which is happening, amongst, the third world, countries, for example. Now, that title, whatever, you have finished it with, that title will only come on the title flap. You will not write here writer's name, your name. You will not write your reader's name. You will not write any date, nothing. Only the title of your report. That's it. That is, title flap. The second page, which we call as the title. On this title, report title, you will write 4 items. Item number 1 will be again the topic name. Item number 2 will be the writer's name. Item number 3 will be the reader's name. And the 4th thing is the date. The date, you are, let's say, sending it for publishing or sending it, to your receivers, for example. Now, 4 things I mentioned. Topic. Now, these 4 things are to be equally distributed on to that, page, which we are saying as, the title page. Let's say the topic of your report at the top, then spaces, okay, and writer's name. And there are different ways of writing writer's name. For example, you can say submitted, let's say by, okay, or you can say prepared by, for example. And then prepared for. Now, for will be, of course, your reader. And then the last one will be, the date. Now, these 4 should be equally distributed. Sometimes, what we do actually, we merge these 4 items and we put it in the middle of the page, and that gives, sort of shabby look, because the rule is, rule of appearance, that white spaces, should be inside the text, not out of the, text. When you distribute these 4 components to the size of your page, for example, what happens? White spaces, they come inside the text, and the eye appeal of your page, of course, goes, of course, up. It's increased. Now, the third component is abstract. Abstract is also called as executive summary and also known as synopsis. Now, this abstract or synopsis or this executive summary, for example, this is the, you can say, the nitty-gritty of your report. You can say the best possible summary of your whole document. Ideally, it should be 1 page long, it shouldn't be more than 1 page. But sometimes, of course, when there are so many, details under discussion, so your abstract, goes on to the second page also. But ideally speaking, 1 page, and that too, 3/4 of your page. This is more than enough. It should be very, very carefully written, abstract. Why? Look, if I am writing a report for you, for example, and now you want to share this report with your colleagues, let's say, or with your subordinates, let's say, you're not going to get copied whole of this report and gonna present in front of your colleagues. No, of course not. Rather, you will be copying the abstract, this synopsis, this executive summary of the report, and then, of course, you'll, distribute it to your colleagues. Therefore, this should be prepared in such a way that it could, give a bird's-eye view of the whole document. If it's poorly written, for example, the whole impression of your document, will be, of course, lost. So you cannot win. You are going to lose otherwise. Now, what comes next? Comes next is acknowledgement. This is our, fourth component of manuscript report. Now, this is a page, frankly speaking, where you can say thank you, to all those, who gave you their help, their assistance. You can Allah Almighty. You can thank, though, let's say your family members, you can also thank. You can thank, the people who gave you this opportunity, for example. You can thank all the, places which you visited to collect data. You can thank the samples, like, which you used for your surveying, let's say. So this is such a place, where you express your gratitude. So you, do make a very good use of it, because it's always nice to say all those, who gave you their assistance and help, thank you very much. Comes next is table of content. This table of content, of course, primarily, contains in itself two things. Of course, chapters and the page numbers. Sometimes, we go into, you can say, the subheads of the chapters or the contents of the chapters also, and then, of course, their page numbers as well, like, we give. Well, it depends. If there are, let's say, 4 or 5 chapters, let's say, in your document, so easy way is, write the chapter name and the page number. So 4 or 5 chapters, this is called sectional content page. Other one is where you go by, let's say, the areas of your investigation, like chapter, of course, plus inside subheads, inside, contents as well, inside areas also, and you number them as well. It's your choice. Now, there is another layout problem, for your content page. People use lots of bullets, rather overuse of bullets, and, then page numbering and, bullets, and page looks so much cluttered, actually. The best advice I can give you is try the tab, I mean, let's say if it's a main, item of the content, so you can type it along with the left margin of your page. It's subhead, for example, so one tab. Now, the sub of the subhead, for example, so double tab you can press. So this is how, the tab work can make your, page look, I would say, more, crispy, organized, and less shabby. Comes next is page of illustrations. Now, what is this page, and what's the difference between content page and illustration page? Very simple. Content page, of course, chapters and its, areas or the subheads. Illustration means, if in your report you have used some images, let's say, you have used some pictures, some graphs, some maps, there are some diagrams, tables, pie charts, whatever, any image which you tried in your document, it has to be also named along with the page number. And now it cannot be written, actually, or recorded on the table of content. Then we design a separate page right after the table of content, and we name it table of illustration. Here we give, of course, the figure number, then its full-fledged name, and of course the page number. Let's say on page 69 you used the map of Pakistan, let's say. You have to, in the illustration, page, you have to write that fig, the map of Pakistan, for example. Its source you can also write, plus the page number. So this is how you design table of illustration. Comes next is introduction. Now, half of the optional components, we have covered, and now we are moving towards, report proper, the actual body of your report, introduction. Now, in this part of your report, you actually include two very important things. You have a free space also. Some writers, they use here, little innovation also. They try very broadly, to touch the actual subject, in hand, whatever, the subject they are investigating in. They can very broadly open it, but you can do it, that stuff. But do not forget including two very important things in introduction. The first of all, the authorization. I mean, who authorized you actually to research, investigate, and submit your work? I mean, if I have, for example, authorized you to write a report for me, on so and so topic. So in introduction, actually, the authorization, authorization is now actually I authorized you. So you have to talk about what was the origin of this report. I mean, who was the man who gave you this idea, to investigate, right, and submit your work, number one. Number two, procedures. Now, what are procedures? This is very important. Look here. Your report can be very easily, analyzed or assessed and evaluated by 2 points of your report. First of all, your topic. If your topic is broad in nature, we'll say that, the research is of less, I would say, fruit. I mean to say, broad topics, do not end researchers nowhere, frankly speaking. So if your topics are very narrow, with a very, very strong focus, so we call it, the real report. Because, the definition of report is, the definition of research is, what? Inch a hole, dug miles deep down. So when topics are broad in nature, so that inch a hole does not it comply with. And dug miles deep down, of course, this fact, of course, will be violated. Therefore, topic is something, we can analyze your reports. Number two, the procedures, which you adopt. Now, what are procedures? Procedures are the sources of information, When you analyze your topic, then you ask yourself, many questions from which sources, you will be collecting your information. You will be interviewing people, you will be conducting surveys, you will be visiting libraries, you will be having some kind of, discussions, let's say. You will be using primary data, secondary data, all that stuff, that you have to decide in the early part of your report. And all these things, you mention in the procedure. I mean, what procedures you adopted to collect information for your research. So these two things are, I would say, core elements of your introduction, this component of your report. Other than this, of course, you can do anything. You can, the way I said, writers, they, try to write something about, the subject, actually. For example, if it's a report about psychology, for example, so they'll be writing few lines about, psychology. If it's on geography, for example, so they may feel like, writing some, lines about geography. We don't mind, but do not forget these two important. If any of these two is missing, we would say that that's the incomplete report. Let's move towards the, second core component of your report, which is findings. Look, you decided procedures of your report. You decided interviews, surveys, observation, for example, all these things. Findings are what? Findings are the results of your research. Let's say your first procedure was survey. Exactly the same way in your findings, you will give the outcomes of that survey. Second procedure you adopted was, let's say, interview. Then the second component of your finding will be interview. If the third one is sightseeing, I mean your own observation, you went to that place, and you collected information, then the third component of findings will be, of course, the results of, your observation. Now, findings, in other words, is the data which you have collected from all different sources. That has to be categorized, organized exactly in the same fashion, the way procedures, have been enlisted and used. The next component is conclusion. Now, this is not an essayist kind of a conclusion, in which you try to summarize. No, report's conclusion is totally different from conclusion of an essay or a story. In reports, you compare and contrast the bits and the pieces of your findings. Look, finding page is what? It's just the recording of all the data, the results of your interview, the results of the surveys, the results like, of your, the books which you consulted. In separate spaces, you keep writing in proper order. But in conclusion, what you do actually, you compare and contrast. Let's say you compare the outcomes of your interview and you compare it with the outcomes of discussion, which you conducted. Then you compare the results of these two, let's say, with the survey. So conclusion is actually a comparison and contrast of the bits and pieces of the findings. Conclusion makes readers from a very broader perspective to reach a very narrower point from where they could see the problem, with one single eye, or you can say in one glance that, they can understand. In other words, conclusions, they lead the readers towards some solutions. So conclusion should be very carefully, prepared. Do not try to summarize findings in your conclusion. Then the actual function of conclusion, of course, will die. Now, let's move towards the last part of the core component, and that is, of course, recommendations. Recommendations, of course, means different solutions, you can talk about here. There is no limit. You can give one solution or recommendation, or you can give 10. It doesn't matter. But make sure this recommendation has two important things or two important points. First of all possible. We call it possible solutions. And the second important component of this page is proposed solution. Now look here. You are not just, giving 5-6 solutions and telling your readers or leaving it on to your readers like, pick and choose the one, suits you. No. Since you have done research yourself, you've spent your days and night in doing things, so it becomes your job also. If it's not mentioned, it's considered your job that, you mention the proposed solution also. And then in future, people may ask you that send us some, feasibility also, or send us, some implementation also. Then, you can write some proposals also and blah, blah, blah. But in recommendation page, two things are important. Possible solutions and number 2, proposed solutions. These 4 are, the core components of your report. Introduction. In introduction, do not forget writing 2 things. Number 1, the authorization, and number 2, procedures. Finding pages, very carefully, prepared page where you record all the bits and pieces of your, procedures. And then comes conclusion. Conclusion is not a summary, it's comparison and contrast of bits and pieces of your findings. And recommendation, of course, is the one which is prepared, of course, in the light of the conclusion or in the light of the contrast or the comparison, which you have made. And do not, again, miss important part of your recommendation page, which is suggested solution. Now, let's move now towards the remaining optional components of your report. And they are, first of all, appendices. Appendices, its singular is, of course, appendix. Now, any extra information which you feel like, should be submitted with your report, and you also feel that you cannot discuss its details in the core components of your report, that piece of information, of course, you can tie up in appendix. In other words, in the core components of your report, you write the information of primary importance. If there is any information which is of secondary importance, and it's very much relevant, of course, to and with the report, that thing, you can attach in the end of your document, and there is a specific place, we call it appendices. And appendices, go this way, appendix 1, 2, 3, 4. It's your choice. You can make it run on. Run on means, one after the other. One paragraph, appendix 2, giving, let's say, 2 spaces, second paragraph. Again, 2 spaces, giving third paragraph. Or on every new page, each appendix, can go. It's your choice. Comes next is bibliography. This is something very important. We talked about bibliography when we were discussing this research thing and documenting resources. Do prepare your bibliography very carefully. This is also called as reference page. In here, all the books, all the magazines, all the journals, all the newspapers, all the websites, all electronic data, which you consulted, has to be properly documented with writer's name, with the source of information, date also, date of publication, place of publication. Of course, we have already discussed, the formats of documenting sources. Exactly in the same fashion, you have to give, alphabetically, you can arrange them. Comes next is, footnotes. Footnotes are what? If there are any technical words, which you used, their definitions you can, give, technical words, and their simple translations. Or if there are some abbreviations, then their full-fledged meanings. You can, page-wise, you can organize. Let's say footnote of page 1, footnotes of page 2, 3, or footnotes of chapter 1, chapter 2. This way, you can organize. Last one is index. Index is a page in which all the keywords of your report, we alphabetically, with page numbers, arrange in the end. And people say that there are 2 content pages of your, in books also, magazines also, there are always 2 content pages. One, of course, the formal content page, and second, index is also content page. How? Let's say you want to know the word flower, that randomly, you pick one book and, you want to know that whether there is any entry of flower in this book. Very simple thing. You'll, of course, go to the content page and you can, eyeball through whether there is any mentioning of flower word in it. Answer is no. And, of course, then we put that stuff aside. Don't do that. Now, go to the index page. Index also, keywords alphabetically arranged. Go to F and see, the flower is mentioned. If it's mentioned, it will be mentioned with the page number. From that page number, you can go back to the page and see, one sentence or 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, on this subject you can find. So this is how, that's the importance of index. This is our manuscript report format. Now, what's our other, report format, which I said memo and letter report format, which we called as short report formats. Of course, what is letter. The format of a letter, there's a sender's, sender's name, then date thing is there, receiver's name is there, salutations are there, subjects are there, and then the body of the letter starts, and in the end, you have some salutation, what you call that, closing notations, and, sign, wine, and all, that's, of course, letter. And what's memo? Memo is again, to, from, date, subject, and then, of course, the body of the memo. The actual difference is, of course, in the body of the letter. In manuscript reports, the proper report was introduction, findings, conclusion, and recommendation. In here also, our first paragraph, and now I'm talking about the body of the report, actual body of the report. The first paragraph will be named as terms of reference. Now, terms of reference means exactly the same thing which I talked about in manuscript report format, the origin of the report or authorization. Terms of reference means who authorized you, when that person authorized you, and what he wants from you, and when you are supposed to turn in this research. Turn in means when you are supposed to submit this research or return, your research. All these details you're going to write in one paragraph, and the headline of this paragraph will be terms of reference. It usually starts this way. This is with reference to our meeting on so-and-so day in which Mr. So-and-so requested Mr. So-and-so to investigate and research so-and-so matter and turn the details in on so-and-so date. This is how this paragraph usually starts and it ends. And we call it terms of reference, and we write headline also. The second paragraph then will be procedures. Exactly the same way. Here also, we'll make a list of all the procedures. Let's say, and the lines are written in passive voice, like interviews were conducted, surveys were conducted, libraries were visited. This is how the resource persons were contacted. So this is how, we'll be preparing. And then comes findings. The third paragraph will be findings. Here also, the results of all our procedures, we are going to enlist with the help of some bullets or some, numbers. Next paragraph will be conclusion, in which, we are going to again compare and contrast the bits and pieces of our findings. The last one will be recommendations, some solutions, some pieces of advice prepared in the light of our conclusion. So this is how short reports, they are, constructed. Difference, did you see? Manuscript report format, every item is on a new page. Whereas in short report, what we do is every item is in every new paragraph, not on a new page. That's the difference. That's why we call short reports are run-on reports. Run-on mean one content finishes, second item starts. Second finishes, third starts. So it's a run-on document. If you're using letter format, of course, all the letters, protocols you're going to follow. If you're using memo format, all the protocols of memo. Protocol, please do not forget, protocol means the way letters are written actually. Senders and receivers addresses, then the closing things, and all and enclosures, CCs, and memos also. The body is actually a different thing. Of course, we do not give headlines in letters and memos, but in letter report and in memo report, we are going to give, these 5 headlines which I have just mentioned. Terms of reference, number 1. Number 2, procedures. Number 3, findings. Number 4, conclusion. And number 5, recommendation. In your handouts, I have given some samples as well. Samples of manuscript report format. Over there, you can see in the real sense what title flap is, what title page is, what our content page, and how it's different from, table of illustration. What are findings? What are what you call, conclusions and recommendations and appendices and, reference pages and all. And in the same way, what are letter report formats and memo report formats? You can see, the samples and can understand the real sense. Okay, now let's move towards the second classification of report. That's classification from content of the report. Here we can have 3 types, like informational reports, examinational reports, and analytical reports. Informational reports are WH reports. Here we collect information and we do not compare and contrast the bits and pieces of this report. We do not write recommendations, we simply collect information and very nicely we organize and present it to our reader. So these reports, always end at findings. And there is one small paragraph in which, no, this is not exactly the same paragraph, which we usually write in reports. This paragraph is actually in which we'll summarize our findings. Second one is examinational report. These reports end at conclusions. Now, when I say conclusion, the real reportic conclusion mean you write findings and then a real good size paragraph in which you compare and contrast all the findings which you have got out of your research. The third type is analytical reports. Here, of course, findings will be there and a compared and contrasted body which we call conclusion, and in the light of conclusion, the recommendations in which you write, or the solutions which you write, including possible and proposed solutions. So this is how it means. What actually is the relationship of this content classification with the length classification? Very simple thing, that manuscript reports can also end at findings if the report is informational. They can also end at conclusion if the report is examinational, or they can also end at recommendation if the report is analytical. Now, how or who will decide what the report should be? Of course, the one who authorizes you. If I'm going to authorize you to investigate something for me, of course, I can ask you that, this report should be informational. Then your job will be to visit, different libraries, different people, different resource persons, and collect information and submit me. That's it. The remaining job will be mine. I mean, I will be then comparing and contrasting, and I'll be like, then finding out, what recommendations are for me. Or I can say that, prepare an examinational report and leave the recommendations on to me. Reading or browsing your conclusion, I can decide myself that what should be, the solution. Or I can simply ask you that give me a real good service by not only collecting findings, comparing and contrasting in conclusion, and also writing some recommendations for me so that, I could get a full-fledged, prepared document which could facilitate me in the real sense and could save my time. Dear students, this is all about, report and report writing. Now, I wanted to discuss with you descriptive and narrative writing in this class. I will leave descriptive writing on to my next lecture, but a few words, on narrative writing. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover it up, in 2-3 minutes. Now, narrative writing means what? Simply, writers use narration, of course, to tell what? To tell stories. When they tell stories, it means the past, present stuff also becomes, a subject. Usually, writers, they narrate from the past and they bring their readers, to present. And then they, of course, talk about, some results also. Or they may, lead their readers, towards the, future also. In narrative writing, important thing is that try to, resort to the facts and figures in the real sense. Narrative writing can be based on writers' personal experiences that can be of, fictional thing, or they can be of, factional. I mean to say they can be based on imaginary, narration, or that can be realistic or factual, narration. In narration, 2-3 things are quite important. Number one, whatever events you want to describe, the organization of these events will be a very big question for you. You can use order of importance, for example. I mean, the most important thing you can narrate first, and the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and so on. The second possibility is the chronological format or organizational pattern. I mean, first thing first, and then second, the third, and the fourth, and fifth. Unlike order of importance, where writers, when you are not following, for example, what happened first, what happened second, what happened third, it means in your mind is some sort of dramatic organization. Like, you can start your story from somewhere in the middle, okay, and then you can take your readers to the early part of the story, and then again you can bring them back to the last part. Here, of course, this order of importance narrations, here you need excellent quality of, let's say, innovation, sense of innovation and creativity, because it's not an easy thing. It's very easy to move from past to present. It's very easy to, tell your readers that you woke up at so-and-so time, then what happened next, what happened next, what happened next, till the time you went to your bed and you slept. It's very easy thing. But creating sort of a drama, starting from the noon time, it's different activities and very creatively taking your readers back to the time you woke up, and again, like, moving them towards the evening and the night. Here you require actually lots of creativity, lots of innovations. Of course, narrative writing, you use it, for all different purposes. You can use it in essays also. Also, when you are describing, in descriptive writings, for example, you can make a very good use of it as well. And in journalistic writing, for example, if you take hold of a newspaper, you would see it's total narration, but objective narration actually. What happened, where happened, when happened, who were involved, and how it all happened. And you can, of course, give the rationale also why it all happened. It's a total game of narration. Therefore, you really need to learn it. Its details, like, of course, you can try out your handouts. I have prepared, like, some exercises in your handouts, which you can try and see that how expository writing, which we discussed in the last class, and how narrative writing, for example, what are the similarities and what are the differences, and then do compare it, with your descriptive writing also. Dear students, today in this lecture, we talked about, primarily we talked about, report writing. And in report, I gave you two classifications. Number one, lengthwise, and number two, content-wise. In lengthwise, of course, we named our reports as long and short. And I said long reports are also manuscript reports. And then we discussed, the proper format, I mean to say the core components of your manuscript report, and then optional components. And of course, we discussed do's and don'ts of core components and optional, and short report also, and what are the similarities and differences. And I told you that actual difference between short and long is the body of the report. And I also mentioned that in long reports, which is very important, do not make this mistake, every new component is on every new page, whereas in short reports, every new item is in every new paragraph, not on every new page. That's the major difference. Over there, headlines also differ. We have introduction in manuscript report, whereas in short reports, we have terms of reference and procedure. Please do not forget, indirectly I mentioned the same thing, that on page of introduction, do not forget writing two things, authorization and procedures. In short reports, look here, very distinctly we mention terms of reference, which is actually terms of reference means, of course, authorization, and then procedures. And then, we move towards the remaining optional parts where we talked about, how to, prepare this bibliography thing, appendices and index, and of course footnotes, and a few words like, I gave on narrative writing as well. In our next lecture, we'll talk about two more styles of, writing. First of all, descriptive writing, and secondly, persuasive writing. With this, thank you very much. Take a very good care of yourself and each other. See you next time with descriptive and persuasive writing. Till then, bye-bye.